specialist, GoldSilver.com, and Kurt Nelson, founding partner, CEO of Summer Haven Investment Management. Thank you both for being with us. And Alan, you talked about how well gold and silver have done this year, and in fact that the demand has been very strong, even in some cases almost outweighing the supply. A little bit about the picture that has been.
Yeah, so both metals are up about 30% on the year, which is pretty impressive, and it's a lot more than most analysts were predicting at the start of 2024. And yes, in the case of silver in particular, demand is outstripping supply. And so 2024 has been the fourth year in a row where that has been the case, and 2025 is probably going to be the fifth year where demand continues to outstrip supply. So for sure, in the case of silver, I'm definitely expecting the price to continue to increase next year because of that supply-demand mismatch. And in the case of gold, I'm expecting it to go up for a completely different reason. It's because gold is money. It's an inflation hedge. It's a safe haven. It's going to help protect investors against inflation, and we're seeing that in the United States and all over the world. So I'm expecting both metals to go up in 2025.
I mean, Kurt, you noted how consumers are really interested in these precious metals, so much so that they go to Costco to buy some gold. That being said, you think this will continue into 2025 as well?
Yes, hi, great to be here today. And I do think this rally is going to continue. I think commodities more than any other asset trade on supply and demand. And, you can't just print gold or print silver the way you can print money or bonds or stocks, through a secondary offering. You have to mine it and refine it and store it. And so, when demand increases and is steadily increasing, that creates a potential shortage and higher prices. We've seen consumer demand, as you said, at Costco, sort of, $200 million a month. They're running out each month and have to restock for this, to meet this retail demand. On the other end of the spectrum completely are the central banks around the world. They often use, in addition to, for example, euros or dollars or treasuries, as a reserve, they often hold gold, and that's been increasing. And I have some reasons for believing that to continue. But we do know, just factually, in the first half of 24, that was something like 483 tons of gold. We think about gold in dollars per ounce. We don't measure it in tons very often. That was more than $40 billion of gold the central banks bought. And there's a good reason for it. There's concerns about the deficits in the U.S. and about the potential shakiness to the independence of the Fed, to what Treasury is going to do as the cost of financing this debt gets higher and higher and higher. We don't really know what 25 is going to bring with a Trump administration and a Republican House and Senate. Also, I think one of the things we've learned in the last few years is that having dollar assets exposes a nation to the long arm of the U.S. law. And I think about Russia, for example. You might hold dollars or treasury bills as a reserve asset, but they learned the hard way that America could decide to freeze those assets after Russia invaded Ukraine. So any foreign country that is concerned about a unilateral move by the U.S. to make them a pariah has to have a little bit of concern about having everything in dollars. And gold is a backup currency for those central banks as well. I think that will continue in 25.
Yeah, and Alan, you have some looks as to where we could be headed as far as target prices. Goldman Sachs talked about gold going to 3,000 in 2025. I see you have your targets, silver going up 25%. Tell me about your targets for gold and silver for 2025.
Well, sure. So by the way, remember that most of these investment banks, when they were choosing their targets for gold at the start of 2024, they were all super low. They put up numbers like 2,100, 2,200, 2,300, and that's it. And they had to keep revising their forecasts up throughout the year. And here we are around 27. So, yeah, I think $3,000 next year is pretty much a guarantee. I mean, of course, it's not a guarantee, but I think that's a lowball guess, 3,000. I think about 3,150 could be reasonable. Remember, earlier this year in 2024, you could buy gold under $2,000 an ounce. That feels like ancient history, but it was earlier this year. You could get it in the 1900s. So 2024 was the last year you could get it under 2,000. I think 2025 might be the last year you can get it under 3,000. So I'm expecting it to go up and never look back. In the case of silver, I'm thinking about 25% on the year would be reasonable. Of course, it's up 30% this year, but I think 25% next year is reasonable. So that would put it around $40 an ounce. Of course, that's still off its all-time high of roughly $52.50. But the following year, 2026, I'm expecting it to break out into all-time highs and never look back. So should be another good year or two for both metals.
Yeah, and we've seen China once again showing its interest and demand for gold. I mean, people have been talking about that. Kurt, we only have a few seconds left. A final quick thought for 2025.
Sure. Just as a reminder for everyone, one of the main reasons for having gold is as a store of wealth. It's been used for centuries that way. And, a couple hundred years ago, an ounce of gold would buy you a nice wool suit, a pair of leather shoes, and a dinner. And it sort of does today at around $2,500. And I think that sort of safe haven asset in a risk-off event, we don't know what 25 is going to bring, I think, but it could be volatile. There could be a lot of changes with tariffs and different administrative decisions by the Trump administration that will shake things up from its Goldilocks kind of point right now. I think that could be really tough on stocks and bonds. I think that chaos is going to do very well for gold.
All right. Great to see you both. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Alan Hibbard, GoldSilver.com. And